Today we're going to be learning Masechet Beitzah Daf Zayin. This is the daf for the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Today's daf is dedicated by Ellen Werlin and Rachel Gabal in honor of the yahrzeit of Jim Dinerstein, who was a lifelong learner who taught his daughters to pursue learning and taught us a sense that we can always try a new challenge. Two of the many ways that he inspires them as they learn the daf. Okay, we will now start with our daf at the bottom of Vav Amud Bet. We saw it yesterday that Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, Beitzah im yetziata nigmera, which means an egg, when it goes out, it becomes complete. What exactly that means, we saw a few different options. We'll see a number of different options more today. Altogether, there's going to be 5 explanations of this halacha. So what we saw first was, as it comes out, it no longer is meat, like a chicken, like a bird, and it can be eaten with milk. We had a question on that, so we went to a second option. When it's finished, it becomes permitted to eat on Yom Tov. That also we asked. That doesn't make sense. It makes sense, but it seems to be the same thing as our Mishnah, and we basically reject that. Then we had im yetziata nigmera, as it goes out, it's finished. And we said, let's look, we'll start 2 lines from the bottom of Vav Amud Bet. Ela im yetziata nigmera umegadelet efrochim. When it comes out, it's complete. And if it fully comes out, then it can actually be used. It can, if it's a chick, then it can actually have other chicks, okay? It can be reproduced. But if you slaughter the hen and inside you take out the egg, if it never actually went out of the body, then it can never reproduce. Right? So if you take it out from the insides of the mother and it's not actually laid, then it can never do that. What's the relevance of this halachically? Well, it doesn't really have halachic relevance. It has business relevance. Okay, for business purposes. We'll give you an example. Someone said, who has eggs that came from a live chicken? Yavule be deshchuta, and instead they brought him eggs that came from a slaughtered bird, a slaughtered chicken. To the kamed to Rabbi Ami, went in front of Rabbi Ami and said, "I want my money back." Amar lehu mekach ta'udu v'hada. Yeah, you can get your money back because you were sold the wrong eggs. They weren't the ones you were looking for. So the Gemara says, Pshita, obviously, you wanted to buy eggs that could reproduce, right? That had chicks in them that would reproduce, and instead you got eggs that can never reproduce. So isn't that obvious? You should get your money back. So you might have thought, he really did want them for eating, not for reproducing. But the ones that come from a live chicken, when he said, I want them to come from a live hen, we assumed that meant, and that's what really the halacha is going to assume, he meant he wanted ones that could reproduce. But theoretically, maybe it just means you wanted ones that they're srivans. So some people explain srivan is they have the Shantas explains they have a harder shell and they're stronger. Okay, so because of that, you preferred those. What's the relevance? Okay, still you didn't get what you wanted. So what if I would have thought that maybe you didn't want ones that could reproduce, you just wanted them to eat, but you wanted ones with a stronger shell, maybe so they won't break so easily. L'mainav kamina. What's the relevance though? Still, you would get your money back. Well, they say l'mitva la bene bene. You might have thought that maybe you just get back the difference in price. Maybe you can't say it's a total mekach ta'ut because you really did want them for eating, and these are for eating. They're just not as good, and maybe you just get a price differential back. Comes the halacha teach you, no. We assumed you really wanted them for reproducing, and therefore it's a mekach ta'ut, and you get all your money back. Right? Mekach ta'ut means it was a sale done under false premises. Right? It was I didn't get what I planned to buy. Right? This is classic of returning on Amazon. Right? You know what? This is what I ordered. I didn't get what I ordered, right? I had this recently where I ordered something and they sent me something totally wrong. They sent conditioners. Instead, I ordered other things having nothing to do with that at all. And then they wanted me to return it. And I said, but it's not my fault. It's your fault, right? You were totally irresponsible. Why do I now have to go, right? And good question, right? Am I responsible to return the wrong item that they gave me? They actually said to me, well, return the item and then we'll send you what you ordered. And I said, that's not fair. It was your mistake entirely, right? And in the end, they took responsibility. This comes up all the time, right? Is it a mekach ta'ut? Is it, okay, what is it? So now they say, another case. Sahu de'amar lehu be'edid dachra leman. Okay, here's another case. Somebody says, eggs from a male, who has them? I want to buy eggs that were, now there's different types of eggs. There's eggs that a hen lays that don't have chicks inside, that weren't from a male, but they just create eggs all the time. And the Gemara is going to call this disafna me'ara, that they got them from the ground. Okay, the heat of the ground kind of created the egg. That's the way they put it here, even though it's not exactly the way it works. And then there's ones that are fertilized by a male. So if somebody says, I want eggs that come from a male, okay, so they said, who has eggs of a zachar to sell me, of a male, right, that were fertilized by a male. Right? These are the difference between fertilized eggs and non-fertilized eggs. Instead, they got unfertilized eggs. They went before Rabbi Ami. Yeah, you got the wrong thing. You can get your money back. To which the Gemara again says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? So they say, well, maybe he wanted the fertilized eggs, not for the chicks, but to eat them. Maybe the ones that are fertilized are fatter because they're from a male and somehow they're fatter and therefore you get bigger eggs, like large, extra large, right? Maybe they're bigger eggs. And therefore, maybe that's what it was, and not that it was totally the wrong, you got the egg for the wrong purpose. So they say, same as before. What's the difference? It's still not what you ordered. Well, right? Maybe you would just get the price differential, that it really, you could cancel the whole sale and get your money back. Okay, that was all the third explanation of and megadelet efruchim, right? But if, right, that's what the Chiddush of Rab is telling you, the Beitzah, once it's laid, it now is potentially, it could reproduce, but if it's found inside the mother, then it can't reproduce. And then the relevance is only for sale purposes. Second option for today, with the majority of it out, it's as if it's out. Okay, well, what's this? Rabbi Yochanan says, here's the relevance. If you learn Chulin, you might remember, we talked about this with an animal putting out part of its body or its head and then going back inside. Likewise, the egg comes out and then goes back in. If it came out, according to Rabbi Yochanan, once the majority of the egg comes out of the root of the hen, and then even if it goes back in, it's as if it was born today. So therefore, you'd be allowed to eat it the next day if that happened on Erev Yantiv. Some people say, no, it's not im yitziat ruba with the majority coming out. It's actually the opposite. Im yitziat kula nigmecha, only when it fully comes out. And that's to specifically tell you they don't hold like Rabbi Yochanan. Ulafuke mi Rabbi Yochanan, right? To disagree with Rabbi Yochanan. So here, let me read it inside. But im yitziat kula in. Only if the whole thing comes out. Aval ruba lo, but not if the majority comes out. Ulafuke mi Rabbi Yochanan, and basically this comes to disagree with Rabbi Yochanan. Gufa. Now we're going to go more in depth into something we saw previously. If you slaughter, this is from yesterday's daf, you slaughter a hen and you find eggs that are complete. You can eat them with milk. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, if they had sinews on them from the animal, then they're forbidden, then they're considered meat. Now we're going to bring something else. If you consider these eggs that are attached, like have sinews attached to them as meat, then Man Tana Lahaditanu Rabbanan. So who's the author of this bright? And Rabbi Yaakov says, if they have the sinews, it's a problem. Tanakama says it's not. So it says here, and now we're going to talk about not eating, but what's considered meat of the animal for the purposes of what we call Tum'at Nevela. That's if an animal dies on its own without being slaughtered, it also passes on impurity. So Ha'ochel min Nevelat of Tahor. If you eat from the Nevela of an of Tahor, this is a type of Tumah that while you're eating the nevela of a kosher bird, while it's in your throat, you have a level of impurity. Your body's impure. Things you touch can become impure. It's a whole category of nevela of tahor. So now the question is, if you're eating from that nevela, or not only from the animal itself, from the meat, but min hashalal shel beitzim, from the eggs, a cluster of eggs, Mina atzamot, from the bones, mina gidim, from the sinews, mina basar shenitlash mina chai, or Now, what they're saying now, okay, I should have read it. I should read it a little better. If you're eating from an avela of tahol of these parts, in other words, the meat, for sure you become tamei. But if you're eating, or you have that tumah avela, but if you're eating from a cluster of eggs from it, from the bones, from the sinews, like these are not edible parts of the animal, really. Umina basar shenitlash min achai, or let's say it wasn't a dead animal, but it was live. It was a live bird, and you took a part from a live bird, tahol. You're impure. You're pure. There's no impurity here at all. Mina eshkol shel beitzim, but from, now it's unclear what exactly this means. We'll see it. Most interpretations, the Quran says it means the ovaries of the eggs, meaning the ovaries, not the eggs themselves. Mina korkavam, which is called the craw, b'nei ubnei me'ayin, from the insides, or you melted, you heated up the fats and you swallow them, tamei. Then you become impure. And those are considered like the meat of the animal, and the first category are not. So man tanam neshalal shel beitzim tahor, who's the one who says this? Rav Yosef deloke Rabbi Yaakov, because we're assuming this cluster of eggs that's inside is connected to the sinews. So it must not be like Rabbi Yaakov, who says that if it's with the sinews, Rabbi Yaakov said if it's with the sinews, it's problematic. Here it said we don't treat it as meat. There we treat it as meat for the purposes of basar b'chalav. So we're assuming right now that tumah and meat and milk are the same, right? Whether it's considered meat for the purposes of meat and milk, or whether it's considered meat for the purposes of nevela, of a dead bird. So now they say, De'ike Rabbi Yaakov, right? It can't be Rabbi Yaakov because he said, Ima yuma orot migidim asurim. So Amalei Abaye Mimai, why are you comparing these? They're apples and oranges. Dilma adkan lo kama Rabbi Yaakov hatam elelinyani sura. When it comes to Isser, is it forbidden to eat? Yes, we're going to say it's forbidden. Let's be stringent. But maybe for Tumah purposes, we'll say it's not Tamei. Why? Maybe Tumah should be the same, just like we're strict when it comes to forbidden foods. We'll be strict when it comes to impurity. But afushe Tumah midirabanan lo mafshina, when it's only dirabanan issue. It's here, it's not clear. It's forbidden, right? Do we say, well, it has sinews on it, we should be stringent? We're not going to be stringent when it comes to tumah, because then we're creating all sorts of situations where things that are supposed to be pure become impure, and that creates a big mess in society. And better off to always minimize how many things become tamei, so there's no point. Whereas to say, don't eat it with milk, that we can be strict about. That was the first reading of how we brought this source in and how it connected. So again, we had Rabbi Yaakov, who said, if it's mixed with sinews, it's a problem, these eggs, if it's inside the animal. Then we said, but that doesn't seem to jive with this, the first part of this Beitzah about the shalal shel beitzim, the cluster of eggs, which we don't treat as meat. How, right? So maybe this isn't Rabbi Yaakov. In the end, we said, no, we can differentiate, and maybe even Rabbi Yaakov would agree. But some people say, they were specifically talking about the eshkol of beitzim, which we said, not exactly clear what it is. It sounds like a cluster of eggs also, but it must be, it's the place where the eggs are kind of attached, which is by the ovaries. So Amar Rav Yosef, so who says eshkol shel beitzim is impure? Rav Yosef says it must be Rabbi Yaakov. Because right, it's the eggs right next to where they come from. It sounds like they're attached. So Amalei Abaye, what do you mean? Originally, right now, they're thinking maybe eshkol is the eggs themselves. To which the Gemara answers, as I said earlier, this isn't really talking about the eggs themselves. Wait a minute. If you want to say what's really why are they telling you about eshkol gufe? Mida ahave akorkavanu b'nei me'ayim da'af agav de basar ninhu kevan de'ike inashe delo achle itzrich lashmuinan. They're now saying, you might think eshkol gufe. What's it talking about? One second. Sorry, I think I skipped something here. Amalei Abaye. Let me go back. Mimai de eshkol mehanach detalia beeshkol. Sorry, I knew I skipped a line. How do we know that the eshkol is the eggs that are attached to the ovaries? Dilma eshkol gufe, maybe it's the ovaries itself. And then it's part of the body of the animal, and that's why it's impure, because it really is the meat. It's the meat, whatever flesh there is or around the ovaries. So now they're going to say, wait, if you're going to say eshkol really means the ovaries themselves, or some people say it's like in the Shanstein, they call it in the Hebrew the shidra, the spine. Not exactly sure why they're calling it the spine, but okay, either the spine or the ovaries, but some body part. It's not eggs that are external. So then they say, well, if you're talking about a body part, then what's the new, why are they telling you this? Isn't it obvious? Body parts of animals, it's all tumat nevela. So they say, well, they're also body parts. And why are they mentioning them? Even though they're meat of the body, since most people don't eat this stuff, or there are people who never eat these parts, they still needed to tell you because you might have thought they don't carry impurity because people don't normally eat them. Hachanami will say the same thing about the ovaries. Since there are people who don't eat them, needed it to tell us that. So again, either we're trying to say this doesn't work with Rabbi Yaakov because of the Reisha, or maybe we're saying it does work with Rabbi Yaakov only because of the Seifa. And then they say, no, this isn't talking about the eggs attached to sinews. It's actually talking about the ovaries themselves. And then what's the new law? Why are they teaching it? Because you might have thought maybe since nobody really eats it, maybe it doesn't carry impurity, or many people don't eat it. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we're getting into a different thing about eggs and how they hatch and how this affects an egg that was born on Yantif or an egg that we're not sure when it was born. Tanu Rabbanan. Beitzah says, Kol shetash misho bayom nolad bayom. If the animals or the beings or whatever it is mate during the day, then they'll always be born during the day. Kol shetash misho balayla. If they mate at night, nolad balayla, then they're always born at night. Kol shetash misho bein bayom v'bein balayla. If they mate both in the morning, during the daytime, and at nighttime, nolad bein bayom bein balayla. Then they'll be born both day and night. So what does this include? That's a very important fact, because then it means tarnegolot are always born in the day, and we'll see why this becomes relevant. Eggs are always laid during the day. This is a bat, because bats, we know, are nocturnal animals. Humans and anyone similar to humans, which are, both during the day and at night. So Amar Mar, what's the relevance of this, right? They're just telling us biological facts? No, Gemara doesn't do that. So why are they telling us this? Or the Beitzah doesn't do that? We're now going to see what he says. The Amar of Mary Bered Rav Kahana. You check your nest of hens on Erev Yom Tov, and there's no egg there. You get up early in the morning before it's morning. It's muteret because it clearly wasn't born at night. It must have been born yesterday. Now, how did you not see it? Maybe you didn't see it, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. But you checked and you didn't see it. So how could it possibly have been born during the day? Well, the fact is, since we say they're never born at night, it couldn't possibly have been born at night. So what happened here? Maybe you just didn't look well enough and it was really there. Or even if you did, you could say that maybe it was born, meaning, according to Rabbi Yochanan, remember, once the majority comes out, even if it goes back in, it's considered born. So that must have happened yesterday. You didn't see that. So when you came in, you didn't see anything, but really it was theoretically born already. And yes, it just came out at night, but that's not the birth of the egg. The birth of the egg is when the majority came out, at least according to Rabbi Yochanan. So, Ini, is this really true? But wait, we're going to now have the opposite statement of what Rabbi Mary says. Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul Amarav. Badak bekaneshel tarnegolet me'erev yom tov v'lo matza b'beitzah. Same case. You checked before Yantif, there was nothing. Asura, it's forbidden. So how could he say the exact opposite? Since, now you could say two different Amoraim, two different opinions, but they're saying, since it's based on reality, does a tarnegolet give birth during the day, and we're assuming it only gives birth during the day, lays eggs during the day, then this can't possibly be. So what do they answer? There's a difference. That we were talking about kol shetash misho bayom. There was some sort of mating, but when an animal, when a hen lays unfertilized eggs, they can lay at any time because those weren't from tashmish. There was no mating that went on with it. So therefore, we can assume it's from when the egg is laid. We can the case that Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul was talking about in the name of Rav. Also, he says in the name of Rav, that was a case. It's going to be forbidden because we assume the egg came out even at night because it wasn't a fertilized egg. Why can't you assume when it comes? Why shouldn't we be strict here when it comes to Rav Mary and say We don't know if it's fertilized or unfertilized. Maybe it's unfertilized. And therefore, how would you know? Right? So, and it could be, it was on Yantif. So how could we be makel here? And also remember, it'll be ready. It'll be okay tomorrow. So just leave it. That's assuming we hold davar sheyesh lo matir and applies even in safek cases. So what did they answer? B'dika zachar b'hadan. Must be there was a male with her. So it must be she made it with the male. But Dika zachar nami ema me'ara safna. Just because there was a male there doesn't mean she made it with the male. Ravina gemire kol hechad dika zachar lo safna me'ara. We assume that when there's a male around, the hen produces only fertilized eggs. By the way, I looked this up and it's true. They say that. They say or in general, I saw they keep them with males when they're, for ones that you want fertilized eggs, and not with males if you want unfertilized eggs. Basically, they're usually kept separate. I'm not sure if it's definitely the case, but I did see something that seemed to indicate that when I looked up online. Va'ad kama, in what proximity should the male be in order to say it's clearly from a male and it's fertilized, in which case we can permit it on Yantif. Amrav Gamda, in this case, right, where you checked, you didn't see it, but you can assume that it must have been born during the day, because otherwise, they're not born, they're not laid during the nighttime. Amrav Gamda b'shmei darav kol hecha d'shama kalya b'yamama. Anywhere where the hen can hear the voice of the rooster during the day. Remember, roosters also crow very loudly. So we can assume that only produces fertilized eggs. Ava Rav Meri Uvda ad Shitim Bate. He actually had a situation where there was no rooster for 60 houses, and he permitted it because he said it was fertilized because there was a male within, even though it was only within, past 60 houses, and yet he permitted it. V'i kanahara. If there's a river in between them, lo avra, we assume it doesn't cross the river. Sounds like, right, why the chicken cross the road. Chickens cross roads, but they don't cross rivers. V'i kamavra, avra. If there's a bridge, though, it will go over the river. V'i kametzra. If it's a very narrow bridge, though, lo avra. However, hava uvda, and it won't pass over a very narrow bridge. However, hava uvda va'avra metra. There was a situation where we saw a rooster cross over a very narrow rope bridge, but normally, right, we assume not. So again, right, we're going to assume if it's within range, and within a range not just of space and hearing, right, where they would hear, but also it has to be able to actually get there. So now let's go back. What did we say? That the case of Rav Yosef ben Shaul is b'stisafra me'ahara. If that's the case, my iria badak, kilo badak nami. Even if you didn't check, we should be stringent because you don't know, right? It assumes if you check and you saw there was nothing there when right before Yantif, then we assume it was born overnight because it was unfertilized egg. But even if you didn't check, and let's say you didn't check it all on Friday, and now we're Erev Yantif, and now you go into Yantif, and right, today's Tuesday Yantif, so, right, or this daf is for Tuesday's daf. So let's assume that you're on Tuesday of Rosh Hashanah. Monday, it could be it was born on Monday, but we have no idea. So shouldn't we be stringent again? We can eat this in 2 days, right? On Wednesday, so on Thursday. So just wait till Thursday. So what do they answer? No, because kilo badak, if you didn't check, you can assume it was already born yesterday. To which the Gemara says, okay, now why is this? So Rashi points out here, you have to add this, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Because still, even unfertilized eggs, we assume the majority are still born during the day. So therefore we have Rove pushing in your favor to say, since you checked it first thing in the morning on Tuesday morning, Rosh Hashanah morning, we assume that it must have been born to the day of Erev Rosh Hashanah and not at night, because it's less likely it was late at night. Ihachi, well, if that's the case, if likely it was at night, during the day, even if you checked it, you didn't see it, we should still permit it, because maybe, like Rabbi Yochanan said, maybe the majority came out. If we assume the majority of them are laid during the day, and Rabbi Yochanan says laying, most of it coming out, even if it goes back in, it's still considered the egg was laid. Then why don't we just assume like Rabbi Yochanan? So what do they say? Do Rabbi Yochanan lo shachiach? It's very unlikely that the egg would come out and go back in, that the majority would come out. Very unlikely, and therefore we're not going to assume that. Okay, since we brought the statement of Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul, we're going to bring another in the name of Rav. We're going to bring another statement he says in the name of Rav, not connected at all. Amar Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul Amar Rav, Haitu mashchita sakanta legiluya. If you have crushed garlic, Rashi says it's kind of liquidy, you have to worry that maybe the snake put in its venom if you left it open a certain amount of time, and usually overnight, then you can assume the snake put its venom in it and you're not allowed to eat that garlic because it's dangerous because it has the venom of a snake in it, poisonous. Okay, so that's a whole separate halacha. We just bring that because of that's what they said. We are now finished with our whole first section on Beitzah Shenolda. We're now moving on to the next case in the Mishnah. Again, I want to just distinguish between what we talked about. Seor, we had a machloket. Seor b'kezayit, according to Beit Shammai, and chametz b'kikotevet, a bigger amount, right? We don't talk about chametz b'mashu here, as I mentioned a few days ago, because chametz b'mashu is a law in nullification. Is it batel b'mashu, right? Is it never batel because of davar sheyesh lo metirin? But it's not a law here. Here it seems, although we'll see later, we're not talking about this, but it seems we're talking about if you eat, what amount you eat, where you're going to be liable for eating chametz. That's different. You're not liable if you ate a mashu. You just can't eat a mashu because once anything is mixed in with something else, it's not nullified. But you're not actually liable. You're not going to get lashes for eating that amount. But now they say, okay, so Beit Shammai u'Marim Seor b'Kazai. My Tamayu de Beit Shammai. So he says, if really it was the same requisite amount like Beit Hillel says, and it's all Kazayid, well then, Lichtav Rachman Chametz v'lo ba'is Seor. You should have just had the pasuk say Chametz. It shouldn't have mentioned Seor, leavening agent. Va'anamina. We would have said this. Ma Chametz she'en chimutzo kasher. Since it doesn't leaven other things, it's not as severe. And that's b'kezayit, because everything's b'kezayit. So seor shechimutzo kasher lo kol sheken. Seor, which is more strict, of course it's going to be at least a kezayit, at a requisite amount of a kezayit. So seor dekatav rachman alamali. So why did it mention seor separately from chametz? So lomar lecha shiur shel zeh lo kashiur shel zeh. To teach you there's different requisite amounts, because a leavening agent can cause something else to leaven. Right? We're really talking about like a sourdough starter, as opposed to bread, which doesn't leaven other things. Beit Hillel, why do they think it's the same? So why do you have to mention seor and chametz? Beit Hillel, tzriche, you need them both. Why? I mean, I would have said mishum dechimutzo kashet, because it's so strong, it can leaven other things. And that's why. Aval chametz en chimutzo kashet emalo. Maybe you would think not chametz, though only seor is b'kezayit, let's say. So tzricha, that's why you need them both to say, no. Chametz, just like seor. V'ikatav rachman chametz, and if you had chametz, mishum dero'ei lachila, it's something you eat bread, but nobody eats a sourdough starter. Aval seor she'em ro'ei lachila imalo, you might have thought, right? Either it means you might have thought you're not obligated at all. Maybe it's not forbidden at all. Tzricha, that's why you needed both. Each one has something that maybe would have made you think you're not going to be obligated, liable. Ubeit Shammai, late lehu de Rabbi Zera. So now, wait a minute. Beit Shammai doesn't hold like Rabbi Zera. Okay, what's Rabbi Zera? Tama Rabbi Zera, patacha katuv b'seor v'shtiyem b'chametz. Lomar lecha, zeu seor, zeu chametz. Okay, so the pasuk says, you have to know the pasuk. Seor lo yimatzeh bebatechem. This is in Sefer Shemot, chapter 12. You shouldn't find seor in your house. And then it says, ki kol ochel machmetzet. And machmetzet, even though machmetzet in modern day Hebrew means like a starter, a sourdough, like a sourdough bread, machmetzet, but lechem machmetzet. But here it's the root of chametz and not seor. So the fact that it starts the pasuk and talks about seor, and then it refers back to it as machmetzet, which sounds like chametz. He says, what's the reason why it started with one and moved to the other? Lomar lecha zeu seor, zeu chametz, to teach you they're one and the same. So Beit Shammai's whole thing that they're mentioned separately because they're different, does he not hold like Rabbi Zera that they're all one and the same? So he says like this. It must be, we misunderstood the Mishnah. Really, Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel don't disagree about food. When you eat, you're liable for eating a kazayit for everything. Sourdough starter, any kind of leavening agent, or actual chametz. Ki pligi le'inyam bi'or. The question is, when are you obligated to do bi'or? When do you have to burn chametz that you find on Pesach? Beit Shammai savrei lo yafina bi'or me'achila. You don't learn it from food, and therefore it has its own requisite amount. Ubeit Hillel savrei yafina bi'or me'achila. You do learn bi'or from achila, and therefore it's all the same kazai. Itmar nami. It was also said that this is really the machloket from the Mishnah. It's not about eating. Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina machloket linyan biur. The machloket is about burning. Aval linyan achila divrei al kol zeh v'zeh b'kazayit. But everyone agrees that it's b'kazayit. I just want to point out one thing. 1 second. No. Okay. Right. I'm trying to think whether biur means that they're disagreeing about what's the requisite amount of biur, or whether or not you can burn it on yantif if you find it on yantif, and then it would be a yantif related issue. I think I saw someone who said it, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm just going to put it out there. I just want to see if it says it here somewhere. No, I don't see it here. Okay. So I'm not clear whether it's on yantif specifically, or I think I must have seen someone, because I remember saying that when I learned the Mishnah, but I didn't see anyone comment on it here. So whether it's biur, I think it means that it's a yantif related issue, whether you can burn it on yantif, or possibly it just means biur in general. What size do you have to burn the chametz if you find it on Pesach? Okay, so we were in the middle of this proof. So lo yu'elecha. So Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina said, right, but when it comes to achila, everyone agrees it's kazayit. And a further Beitzah, Tanya namihachi, v'lo yireh elecha chametz, v'lo yireh elecha seor. You can't see chametz, you can't see seor. Again, it says both. Zeu machloket bein Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Shebeit Shammai omrim seor b'kazayit, b'chametz b'kotevet, u'Beit Hillel omrim zeh b'zeh b'kazayit. What was the topic there? Lo yireh v'lo yimatzeh, which has to do with biur burning. Okay, now we're moving on to the third case of the Mishnah. Hashochet chayav ha'of b'yom tov v'chule. So we said that Beit Shammai says you can cover it with dirt, and Beit Hillel says you can't cover it, right? You can't slaughter it knowing that you're going to have to cover it with dirt. It's a problem. Beit Shammai says you can slaughter it, ochal nefesh, and then you can dig dirt and cover it. We're going to have to figure out what he means exactly. So hashochet chayav ha'of b'yom tov. If somebody slaughters a bird or an animal, an undomesticated animal on Yom Tov, the Gemara starts off and says, Hashochet di'evedin l'chatchila lo. Hashochet sounds like one who slaughtered, which sounds like even Beit Shammai only holds, if you already slaughtered it, then you could cover the blood, which is going to create a problem because that's going to sound a lot like Beit Hillel. Emasefo, Beit Hillel omrim lo yishchot. Remember, he said you can't slaughter and then cover it. And then it had said, but they agree that if you did, it's okay, and you can cover the blood. So remember, let's just go back. One who slaughters has to cover the blood. What's the problem? Covering the blood creates all sorts of halachic problems. You have to dig, which is partly a problem of choresh, or possibly a boneh that you're building. Then you have a problem of tochem, breaking up big clumps of dirt, and it's like grinding. And then you have a fourth problem, it's muktzah, the dirt is muktzah. So now we're going to say, if really Beit Shammai says it's only b'di'eved, how do we relate to Beit Hillel, who says lo yishchot? Which sounds like you can't do it lechatchila, michlal, the Tanakama, you can't slaughter it, which sounds like Tanakama savar yishchot. It sounds like the first opinion Beit Shammai holds, you can slaughter it. And it's not just if you slaughtered it. So they say, oh, halokasha, that's not difficult. You could say, lo yishchot ve'yichasek amar. When Beit Hillel says it, they said, don't slaughter and cover, really meaning, and Beit Shammai says, don't slaughter, but if you did, you could cover it. Beit Hillel comes and says, don't slaughter and cover, meaning even if you slaughter, don't cover it. The focus being on the covering and not on the slaughtering. However, that really doesn't make sense to say that's Beit Hillel, because umode ema seifa, it says at the end, umodim shem shachat shechpor b'deker v'yachaseh. It says, but Beit Hillel agrees that if you did already slaughter it, then you could cover it with blood. So it can't be he's saying you can't, if you slaughtered it, you can't cover it. So it doesn't make sense to say that Beit Shammai was talking about b'di'eved. Can't be, because that's really Beit Hillel. So let me just keep reading. From here one can infer that only they all agree about di'eved, but Beit Shammai would think even lechatchila, even from the beginning, you can say, I'm going to slaughter this animal even though I know I'm going to have to cover the blood. So Amar Rabba. So Rabba says, Hachi Kamar. This is how to read it. Hashochet shebali malech ketzad omer lo. Hashochet doesn't mean you already slaughtered it. It means you're coming to slaughter and you go to ask a question of a rabbi, can I slaughter the animal? And then what do we say to him? So Beit Shammai omrim omer lo shchot chafor v'chaseh. Beit Shammai says, tell him, yes, you can slaughter it and then dig and then cover it, no problem. Okay, this is because, right, the importance of ochal nefesh, we want you to be able to eat. So we allow you to do it even though you might end up having to do something that might be potentially forbidden. ובית הלל אומרים לו ישחט, אלא אם כן אומרים לו, אלא אם כן היה לו עפר מוכן מבעוד יום. Beit Hillel says you can't do it. If they comes to ask a question, you say don't slaughter it unless you have dirt that was already prepared for this purpose. So then you have to dig, and it's not a muktzah issue, etc. Rav Yosef has a different understanding than Rav. He says hachi kamar hashochet shabali malech ketzad omer lo. Right? If you already if you want to slaughter, what do we tell him? Same question. Beit Shammai omrim lo lech chafur shachot v'chaseh. First dig, then slaughter, then cover. Beit Hillel is the same thing, but Beit Shammai, the order is different. Don't slaughter, then dig, then slaughter, then cover. So Amalei Abai Rav Yosef, Leima Mar, and what's the question here? Should we say that you, Mar, you and Rabba Bidda Rabbi Zera Amarav Kamiflakitu? Are you disagreeing about what Rabbi Zera said in the name of Rav? The Amar Rabbi Zera Amarav. Hashochet tzarich sheiten afar lamata va'afar lamala. Rabbi Zera says in the name of Rav that when you cover the blood, it's not just covering from above, you also have to cover underneath. So maybe that's why you have to dig first, according to what you're saying, says to Rav Yosef. According to what you're saying, you have to dig first because you have to cover it with dirt underneath as well. Where does he learn this from, Rabbi Zera, in the name of Rav? It says, spill the blood, Vikisau be'afar, cover it with dirt. Afar lo ne'emar ela be'afar. It doesn't say kisahu afar, cover it with dirt. It says kisau be'afar, which is a more strength, like a stress on the with dirt. So what do they learn from that? Melamed, it's already a little hard with the translation because kisau afar and kisau be'afar in English you would translate the same way. But that's the point, I guess, that kisau afar is already enough to say cover it with dirt. Why they add the bet? So they said, we learn from here, the bet comes to add that there's earth needed underneath and earth needed above. And then you would say, you, Rav Yosef, who says you have to dig first before you slaughter, must hold, eat later Rabbi Zera, like Rabbi Zera. The Rabbah, who says you don't need to dig first, must hold, not like Rabbi Zera, later Rabbi Zera. So Amrele, Rav Yosef says to him, no, you misunderstood. Bein ledidi, bein lerabba, itlan de Rabbi Zera. We both hold like Rabbi Zera. You need dirt above and below. What's the debate in terms of the order? It's very interesting. Hacha b'haka meflagina. Rabba savar ka afar lamata in ilo lo. Chayshinan dilma mamlich velo shachit. If you have dirt below, Rabba holds, then it's okay. But if not, we're worried you might forget. You might decide, in other words, what does he say? He says, maybe you'll change your mind and you won't slaughter. So if there's dirt underneath, then you can slaughter your animal, but you can't dig before to get dirt underneath. It has to have been there from before. And therefore he says, slaughter your animal. The dirt you need underneath, that has to be there if you're going to slaughter your animal. If you don't have dirt, you can't slaughter your animal on Yantiv. But if you have dirt, then great, slaughter your animal and then cover, and then you can start digging. But if not, we don't allow you to start digging because maybe you won't end up slaughtering, and then you'll have done this malacha, which is forbidden on Shabbat, which we allowed you to do because of the mitzvah of kisoy afar, but you didn't end up needing the mitzvah of kisoy afar because you maybe changed your mind and didn't slaughter. This is a good example of we don't ever know what anyone's going to do, and somebody might decide not to do something. So do we let you do something that's forbidden, which will be permitted in the event that you do this, but maybe you'll never come to do that. Uladidi, but me, I say hadifa, better do it first. Why? If we don't allow you to dig the dirt first, then someone might say, well, you know what? If I don't have dirt, right? What did Rabbah say? You have to have dirt to begin with. If I don't have dirt underneath, I can't slaughter. If I can't slaughter, then I'm going to end up preventing Simchat Yom Tov. We have an important mitzvah of rejoicing on the holiday, eating meat. So therefore, we're even going to allow you to dig before, even though there's a chance that maybe you'll never slaughter, but otherwise there's a problem on the other side. This is always a classic, right? Two different things pulling at you. If we don't allow this, you're going to end up not eating meat on Yom Tov. Umodim, last part for today. If you did do it already, then you dig with your spade and you can cover it. Amar Rabbi Zreika, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, it has to be already in the ground, and then it's less of an issue of digging because you've already kind of dug it into the ground. But wait, You might have resolved the issue of digging, but you didn't resolve the issue of breaking up clods of earth. So Amar Chia bar Ashi, Amarav, Ba'afarti choach. It must have been soft soil that didn't need breaking up. Okay, so then we'll end with one more question on this tomorrow. We'll start in tomorrow's daf with the next question because it's already on daf chet, but we're in the middle of a slew of questions on this issue about how could even Beit Hillel allow the digging, right? If digging is an issue on Shabbat, so we resolve the choresh issue because you already have it stuck in the ground, or at least that issue also you already prepared it, so to speak, because you had this in the ground already, the shovel ready to dig. And you don't have the problem of tochen. Okay, the other problem is going to be, what about digging a hole? In the end, you're digging a hole, so why is that not a problem? Maybe you'll remember from Masechet Shabbat why we don't think that's an issue. We will start with that tomorrow. Anyway, Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Hashanah, everyone. Happy Rosh Hashanah, Shana Tova, K'tiva v'Chatima Tova.